Hey folks, it's Rob Flux here with another Sunday session, and today is a very special session. It is actually called Over the Horizon, and this is where I try to give you my insights into 37 years as both a property investor and also a property developer, is to how and where I read the market and what's actually happening right here, right now. Now, I'm going to cheat a little bit today. I'm going to give you, an extract out of a recording that I did last weekend called Developer Launchpad, and I run that twice a year, and I've been doing that a couple of times every year for the last 5 or 6 years, and putting on public record my view on how and where I see the market. Now, there are lots and lots of challenges that I see in front of us for the next, I'm going to say 2 to 5 years, but with challenge comes opportunity. So the biggest challenge that I see at this moment in time is the fact that we have a housing crisis. Housing crisis is been in the media for, I guess, quite some time, but it's actually been something that I personally have been predicting. For anyone who's been following me for some time, I've been predicting for about 2 years. And in this recording that I'm about to give you, I'm going to give you the insights as to how and why that actually came, and how I was actually able to predict that actually coming. And more importantly, the opportunity that's going to present itself to us right here, right now, because with that housing supply crisis, that is a lack of supply. But on top of that, we also have a huge demand. We've got a huge population increase happening at the moment. Now, the housing supply challenge, we're about 237 houses behind where we need to be. Excuse me, raspy voice from recording last weekend. We're about 237,000 houses behind the housing target that we have set ourselves. And on top of that, we had 518,000 people come into Australia last year, creating a huge amount of demand. And we're projected to grow by another 1.2 million people over the next 7 years. So huge, culmination of events coming together. And the only thing holding us back at the moment is interest rates. So stay tuned, folks, as I give you my wrap on both the housing crisis and everything that sits in and behind it, the opportunities that the government is rolling out to try and help us to resolve that particular issue, because us as small scale developers, we are the antidote to all of this. And so I'm going to highly encourage you to stay to the very end to actually understand how you can actually be, part of the solution, and then, more importantly, the roadmap that it actually means, which is, for anywhere between 2 and 5 years worth of growth. And as part of that, there's both potential for development uplift and also, and also potential for the market uplift that might actually come from that. But only if you are in a position to do something about that. Now, if you are new to property development and you don't quite know what it is that property development is, it's the ability for us to force value onto the property through our own knowledge, our own effort, our own skills. And in doing so, we can accelerate the ability to profit from the process. So rather than waiting 10, 15, 20 years for capital growth, we can manufacture profits. My record is in as little as 6 weeks, but typically anywhere between 9 months and 24 months. If you would like to learn a little bit about how to do that, we run events all the way around the country, Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, and Adelaide. You can turn up to some of these events. We've been running these for 12 years. You can turn up to them physically, and you can also live stream them no matter where you are located in Australia. We're also branching out into Perth in the not too distant future. On top of that, we also have a free course if you're interested in actually learning the property development process. Now, I can promise you at the end of that, you will not be a property developer, but it'll give you the insights into whether or not you actually want to be one. So that is my intention there. And then lastly, if you actually want to get super serious about this, we actually run a 12-month education and mentoring program. It's actually called the Property Development Formula. Click on that link below and you can actually go and inquire about that. Now, that said, that is, a little bit of a wrap up, but go now, have a look at my view on both the housing crisis. This housing crisis has been brewing for 4 or 5 years, folks. It has been a culmination of a couple of things that are actually sitting in the background that if you have been paying a close attention to the market, you'll actually have seen it coming. Now, the media are talking huge amounts of doom and gloom in doing that all the way around the country, with many negative stories out there about how nobody can actually get into the market, how nobody can afford to get into the market, and a whole bunch more. when you actually understand the fundamentals that are sitting behind this, and you understand the background and how we actually got here, you're going to see that this is actually one of the biggest opportunities that you've ever seen in your life. And I say that with the gratitude that it actually needs, if that's the word. It is the gravity, I should say, the gravity that it needs, because it is a perfect setup for something that in any other instance would never actually occur, because there's a couple of events that were falsely triggered that created this. Now, normally we work on market fundamentals, but we had two events that have caused us to break away from market fundamentals. And now that we're returning back to fundamentals, those two events have given us a window of opportunity that has not been there previously. Now, the first one of those, building approvals. Now, building approvals is a little bit of a misnomer. The Australian Bureau of Statistics calls it a building approval. In our speak, in developer world, we actually would call this a development approval, okay? So this is the potential for supply. This is not actual supply, okay? So when you understand the potential for supply, we've got a couple of things that have actually happened in the market that have actually led up to it. Firstly, we had a genuine property market slump for reasons of genuine fundamentals actually sitting there. Then we had COVID. Now, you'll remember when COVID actually occurred, that all of the banks and all of the media were spruiking that we would be potentially going to lose 20 or 30% in our property market. Now, when that's going to happen, there is no developer on earth who is willing to go into a deal and risk everything for the opportunity to lose 20 or 30%. So there was a massive undersupply of development approvals that were happening at that point in time, okay? So we've got a window of 2 years up until that point where no development approvals actually happened. Then we had a very quick spike. We had a construction boom. Now, the construction boom was for a very specific kind of product. That was a single house under $750,000. And so the whole bunch of things consumed all of the spare surplus stock that was actually sitting in the market. So whilst it was the potential was there, it got consumed the moment it actually happened. Then after the construction boom, the cost of construction went up so high that it got to the point where it wasn't viable for people to actually do that. So we had a second wave slump in development approvals. So it was too expensive to actually construct. Deals weren't making sense, and so it dropped off. Now you can see there is a very slight recovery just commencing now. And that is because the bigger developers and the smart developers, the people who have actually been doing their homework, can actually see this this housing crisis here and the opportunity that actually presents. And so they're getting in early. Now, that's what I want you to do. I want you to get in early. We're at the bottom of this cycle. This cycle is going to go for a long period of time. We've got literally 3 or 4 years of undersupply that has been sitting in the market. I cannot stress how much that means. Now, this is the development approval. This is the potential for construction. Then we go to the next one. This is dwelling commencements. The dwelling commencements is the actual construction side of things. So we've got very, very similar stats that are actually presenting here. The property market slump, nobody was actually constructing. The COVID crash, nobody was actually building. Then we had the building construction boom, and then the boom ended, and now the construction has actually started to occur again. Okay, now all of that is telling us we've got 3 or 4 years of not only lack of potential supply, but also lack of actual supply. So we've got our system is got no slack in it. We are literally empty. So there's pretty much nothing left for us to actually take on. Now, you then combine that with our population growth. Now, you can see here, this is where we had COVID and we closed the borders and nothing actually happened. And then we had this massive, massive spike up here. As a matter of fact, 518,000 people, net overseas migrants in the last 12 months. That's a brand spanking new record, 518,000. Okay, we've never had that level of immigration ever. Okay, and it is set to continue for a good while yet. Now, that
has meant there's a whole bunch of people actually moving into the market, actually needing somewhere to live, but there's no supply for them to actually go into. Okay, so now you think that's big, but here's the reality. Okay, that's the tip of the iceberg. Australia is projected to surge another 2 million people in the next 7 years. Okay. And then it's going to keep on growing until Australia reaches 40.5 million people by 2023. Okay. Now, in doing that, 45, in order to do that, 40.5 million people is the equivalent of adding the entire of Sydney, the entire of Melbourne, and the entire of Brisbane combined. So that is how much housing we've got with the population growth that we're anticipated to have. And it's not going to stop. But here's a little tidbit, okay? Our population growth is caused by international migration. Now, when international migration happens, the majority of international migrants come through, the majority of new migrants have a 2-year buying embargo. They cannot enter own a property unless they actually are cashed up. They can't borrow in order to do that. Now, if they come in with a lot of cash, they can absolutely buy. But if they don't, unless they become a permanent resident, then they're not allowed to borrow. Okay. And so that means the first thing that they actually do is they go into the rental market. Okay. And when they go into the rental market, they start competing with everyone else who's in the rental market. So that means that the rental market is a leading indicator of what is actually going to happen when they can start to actually qualify. So when we start to look at what's happened for the rental market, we can see here we've had a massive, massive rental boom. Okay, as a matter of fact, we've had nearly 35% growth rate in rents over the last 3 years. Now, that is telling you massively, we've got so much competition in that rental space, it is actually becoming seriously almost unaffordable to actually even be in the rental market. And pretty soon, once we have interest rates start to drop, it's actually going to be cheaper for people to then start to own. And that's the key that I want you to start to think about. Now, when that starts to happen, right now, we've got a whole bunch of qualified buyers who could buy properties, but they just can't because of the interest rates, okay? But interest rates are soon to be dropping. And when I talk about the market update in a couple of secs, then that's going to give you the insights into when they're going to start to move into the actual buying cycle, okay? Now, for a lot of those migrants that have actually come in, the 2 years is almost starting to come up, which means that pretty soon those people are going to be coming into the buying market as well, which means that there's about to become a flood of people wanting to get out of the rental market and into the housing market. Now, that is, when you see that starting to occur, the only outcome of that is, hey, we're going to have a shortfall. We've got no supply and we've got a massive, massive, massive demand. Now, all of the state governments recognised that, and they got together all the way back in August of 2023 at the National Cabinet, and they created a thing called the Housing Accord. What they did is all the states together got together and went, hey, this is actually bigger than we anticipated. It's massive, and unless we have a coordinated, cohesive approach from federal and state and local government all the way around the country, then this is not going to work, and we're going to have some massive, massive shortcomings. Now, in order to do that, they made some very, very clear goals that they needed to achieve in order to overcome this. They set a goal of 1.2 million well-located homes to be constructed in the next 5 years, folks, okay? Now, the key to this is well-located homes, okay? And I'm going to give you the insights into what is defined as a well-located home in a couple of moments. But that is a lot of houses that need to be constructed and a lot of people that actually need to move into it, and a severe, severe lack of supply. So how do we deliver on that? Well, if that housing target is for real, which it is, in order to achieve that, that means we need to deliver 60,000 dwellings per quarter for the next 5 years. That is 20 consecutive quarters in a row, okay? That is a massive, massive undertaking in order to do that. Australia has never achieved this number of dwelling completions this century. So that is the order of magnitude of the problem that we've actually got sitting here. Now, when we actually look at dwelling commencements over time, when I say we've never done it this century, this is the average constructions in the 2000s We need bigger than our 1980s construction rates actually happening in order to meet these targets. Okay, now that is a huge, huge undertaking. And for that reason, okay, the result right this very moment, we are 200,000 dwellings in deficit as of today. And we are projected to grow by another 37,000 this year alone as we start to ramp up our construction industry in order to actually get here. So we've got a whole bunch of things that need to happen. So that is a total of 237,000 dwellings. 237 dwellings, 207, sorry, say that again, 237,000 dwellings that are going to be short. Now, that is a massive, massive, massive ticking time bomb. Okay. If you agree with me, just kind of punch it into the chat window that you can see that there is absolutely an opportunity to actually resolve this. Now, so what is the solution to this? Well, the solution to this is all of the state governments are putting together a whole bunch of incentives to actually help us to roll this out. And the key to this is high demand for small scale, well-located developments in what is called the missing middle. Now, the missing middle is an industry term that has been used globally for, I guess, a very specific purpose. And I'll talk to what the missing middle is in a moment. So this is the missing middle. Okay, so if you look at the big developers used to do urban sprawl. So new suburbs, new cities, that sort of thing at the outside edges of the city. Okay. And when people said, hey, it's too far to commute, they would go all the way in and build apartments, I guess, right in the center of the city. But the missing middle is the bit that's in the middle. So how do we then carve up those the existing houses and start to put smaller dwellings in the back? So how do we put granny flats, small lot homes, duplexes, triplexes, courtyard townhomes, all of those sorts of things, okay? So the smaller scale filling in. Now, the reason why this is important and the reason why they're well located, there are already roads there. There are already train lines there. There are already highways there. There are already parks and schools and those sorts of things. So when we say well located, it is the most cost-effective way for our governments to actually start to roll out infrastructure. Sewer lines are there, stormwater infrastructure is there, the water is there. It is the cheapest way for them to actually do that. So carving up the big backyard of the past is the only way to actually start to make this actually start to work. Now, here's the thing. When you start to do this, the big developers don't want to touch these. This missing middle, the projects are way too small to cover their overheads. So they want to do the large projects. They want to do 100-lot land subdivisions and bigger. They want to do new suburbs and new cities and that sort of thing. They want to do 20 and 30-story apartment complexes. They want to do the massive projects because they've got a machine. They might have 20, 30, 100 staff that they need to feed. So these tiny little projects are too small for them, okay? But they're not too small for us. So there are profits of between 150 and $1 million. Simply that those profits aren't enough for the big guys, okay? But that can be life-changing for you. And there are so many of these needed, it's not funny, okay? It's meaning it's developers like you that are desperately needed to solve that solution. Now, I'm going to give you some insights into this. What most of you don't realize, whilst the big guys get all the kudos, okay, because they're doing things that have all this massive visibility and they get all the media and market attention. The reality is when we look at the stats all the way around the country, okay, most applications are a 6-pack and below. 80 to 90% of every single development application around the country is a 6-pack and below. So that is granny flats, that is small lot homes, that is small townhouses, okay? So that is you guys, folks. This is set up and primed for you. The big guys can't deliver this. It's you that needs to do that. And because of this, the state governments, the local governments, they're rolling out the red carpet, trying to make it easier for you to actually get in the game. So therefore, are you going to step up? That's the key. This is your opportunity to actually step up and do that. Frank says, yes, sir. Kelly says, hell yeah. Angela says, yes. Paula says, yes. Yuri says, oh, yes. Can we see the opportunity sitting here, folks? Seriously, can we see the opportunity? Adrian says, ready and loaded. Some of you are really shy, and actually, I can see 780 of you online, but I'm only seeing the common names going past over and over and over. So keen for all of you to get involved, folks. Now, if you've been paying attention, I told you, you pay attention, I'm going to reward you. We've got a $250 gift card sitting here for those of you who actually want to get in here. And I've completely forgotten what my question was going to be on this one. So give me 2 secs while I look at what my question was going to be. Okay. Prizes and giveaways. So, okay. What are we on? Okay. I've lost what my question was going to be, folks. My humble apologies. $250 gift card. Okay. Now, again, Beck has got a timer sitting in the background. And when that random timer goes off, whoever is whizzing past at that moment in time will get the prize. So if you don't get your name yelled out, just punch it in again and hopefully it will get passed. So the question, I've got 2 of these gift cards I'm actually going to give away this time around, $250 worth. How many dwellings are needed to be constructed in the next 5 years? What is the target that has been set? How many dwellings? Have it whizzing past. Beck, who is the winner? Hello, Beck. Earth to Beck, come in, Beck. You need to unmute.
The winner is, the timer hasn't gone off yet, so keep going with your answers. Chris Andrews.
Chris Andrews. The answer was $1.2 million. 1.2 million homes are needed in the next 5 years. So now, because I'm going to give away 2 of these, well done, Chris, well done. Because I'm going to give away 2 of these, the second one of these, what is the projected shortfall of houses by the end of this year? Okay. What is the projected shortage of houses? Go whizzing past. There's still people answering the last question. I can see a lot of right answers. I can see a couple of wrong answers. So I'll give you some clues. We are already 200,000 behind, and we have something more projected by the end of the year. What is the total of those 2 combined together? Beck, drum roll, please. Who's the winner?
The winner is Raimundo Granados.
Hey, Raimundo, very good. If you guys can both reach out, the answer is 237,000 homes we are projected to be behind in the next little while. That is a lot of homes, folks. So if you want to be one of those people creating those homes, just while I grab a sip of water, just punch in there. That's me. Okay, I can feel my voice already starting to tear apart, folks. So I'm going to need your love to get me through this day. Okay. Next thing I'm going to talk about is the property market update. So market update, where do we think the market is actually going? I want to give you some insights in how to start to read the market so that whilst you can see what the opportunity is, what is the risk associated with this and what are the things that we need to start to consider in doing that? And the reason for this is that if you are getting into the market today and your project is going to take some time to run, then you want to know what's the market likely to be finishing on in the not too distant future. So when we understand where the market is going, then we can actually start to stress test, hey, whether or not we think that this is going to be a risky deal, whether or not we think that there's going to be some market uplift, whether or not we think the market is going flat, etc. So understanding the market is super key in order to do that. Now, in order to do that, I'm going to show you a couple of things. So I'm going to talk to you what most traditional investors talk about, and that is called a market indicator. And then I'm going to tell you how you can be a savvy investor, and I'm going to get you to look at market drivers, and they are very, very different, okay? So a market indicator is what has already happened in the market, whereas a market driver is going to help you to predict what's actually going to happen in the market, okay? Now, Whoops. So market indicators, how are they used? Well, this is what most property commentators are actually going to help you. They're going to comment on. So it's already reported what's actually happened in the market. The media will typically then report on what the property market commentator says. Then the public tends to respond to the media hype. And then the taxi driver tells you where you're going to buy next. And so there's a very, very lag indicator that sits behind that. Now, what is wrong with these? Well, the problem is that they have a significant lag in the action, not only in when you actually get the message, but also on what has caused the message in the first place. So they can only report on a sale that has actually happened today, okay? But the problem with that is the mindset that went into it, the sentiment that went into that property settling today, that sentiment actually occurred anywhere from 4 to 6 months earlier. Now think about it. They have to think that, hey, I might want to sell soon because wanting to move on. Then they have to go out to the market and they have to talk to a whole bunch of agents. They'll go and interview a few agents and work out which agent's the one they want to deal with. Then they need to prepare their property for sale. Then they will actually want to market the property. They're going to do a whole bunch of open homes. They're going to then maybe do an auction campaign. They're going to sign the contract. Then they have to wait for settlement. So they made up their mind anywhere from 4 to 6 months earlier, okay? And then the settlement actually happened today. So the media commentator, the property commentator, is reporting on what happened today. That's all he can do, or they can do, is actually report on the actual facts, okay? So by doing that, know that there's quite a lag in actually what sits in there, okay? So some indicators that you might see typically, okay? And there's a whole bunch of them that sit out there. So if we're talking about stock availability, you might see things like listing volumes, sales volumes, stock on market. If you're talking about investment stock, it might be talking about vacancy rates and rental yields. If we're talking about stock turnover, it might be days on market, auction clearance rates, vendor discount rates, okay? If we're talking about market sentiment, it's consumer confidence and business confidence, okay? Now, all of those are lagging indicators, okay? They're all telling you what has happened in the market already. So it's great to actually understand them, but know that that lag is actually sitting there. So when you're using that to make as the basis of your decisions, know that you may have already missed the action from time to time. Now, if you are going to use these indicators, then here is an excellent extract from a gentleman by the name of John Lindemann. I want to thank John very, very much. This is an article that he has published quite some time ago called Timing, the Turning Point of the Market. So it's all about how do we actually determine when the market is going just by looking at 2 of these market indicators all by themselves, okay? Now, I'm going to use John's methodology and give you some insights into how everybody else is reading the market right now, okay? And then I'm going to go into teaching you the market drivers to see where you think the market is actually going to go. So sales volumes and listing volumes, when you understand these 2, then you've got a whole bunch of things. Now, if sales volumes and listing volumes are going in the same direction, then we are in a confident market. As a property comes on for sale and it turns over relatively fast, when those 2 are in alignment, the market is going up, okay? If they are going the opposite direction, not many sales are happening and not many listings are happening, then it is clear that we're in a downward trend. But it's the crisscross of these that is super critical to actually understand. Now, it's the crisscross of these. So when you have listing volumes that are up, lots of people are wanting to sell, but nobody is buying, then there becomes a whole bunch of supply and no demand. And when there's a whole bunch of supply and no demand, that's giving you an indication that our market is going to crash, because it only takes one person to become desperate and reduce their price. And when they start to reduce their price, that has set the basis for what the market price point is. Then the next person follows, and then that starts an avalanche of things to actually occur. The next thing is the crisscross going the other way. So if we have hardly any sales going on the market, but every time that they go on the market, they turn over super fast, that means that there is a very hungry market. That very hungry market then starts to get into a bit of a feeding frenzy. And the reason why there's not many listings is because the market is booming. All of us want to hold on to our stock. We want to ride that market. We want to take it to the very, very end. And we'll only put it on at the very end. So it's the crisscross of those 2 that start to make all the really interesting facts with regards to how we're actually going to go. Now, That said, I'm going to go and use these indicators and actually have a look at the market all the way around the country and start to give you some insights into how everybody else is interpreting this market. Okay. Now, firstly, let's have a look at Brisbane. Okay. Now, this is thanks to SQM research. This is publicly available information. You can actually go do this for free. Very easy to actually find. So what I'm looking for here is there's an early sign of an upward trend. Now, I say an early sign, okay? So it has clearly been downward up until then, but it looks like it's starting to turn. Now, when it's that early in the process, it's very hard to know whether the trend has actually locked in or not. But it does seem to actually be appearing that way at this moment, okay? If I look at Sydney, well, that trend is a little bit more solid. We can see that that growth has actually started to happen a little bit harder. If I look at Melbourne, well, this is a little bit harder to tell because we've got some going in a downwards direction and we've got some going in a sideways trajectory. So this is unclear where this is sitting at this moment in time. So there are times when we've got lots of listings and times when we've got hardly any listings. So this trend is not yet clear. It hasn't yet revealed itself. And hence a whole bunch of uncertainty in that Melbourne market. If we look at Adelaide, it was on a downward trend and then again, early signs of an upward trend, very early. Not sure whether or not that has locked in place, but it could be an early indicator as to that crisscross event starting to occur. Perth, again, early signs of an upward trend, has been on a downward trend for quite some time. And again, early sign of that turning. Okay, so that's all of I guess the listings all the way around the country. Now, if we then go to, again, free information, the CoreLogic chart pack, they call this. They release this once a month. So this is the sales volumes. And you can see in that green box that I've got that the sales volumes are up all the way around the country. So it is very, very clear that we've got that upward trend all the way around the country in the sales volumes. And we can see with the 6-month moving average all the way around the country, there is an upward trend on that. So for those of you asking about Tassie and the NT, unfortunately, for time reasons, I'm not going to go into every single state, every single place. Otherwise, I'll be there for a week. Now, let's have a look. So I've tried to map this out as to how and where I see this, okay? So Brisbane and Sydney in a confident market. Melbourne may be crashing. It's a bit hard to tell because it's unclear on where that is. Adelaide and Perth, you guys are in a booming market. So that's kind of how the rest of the industry is starting to see that. For those of you who are located in those locations, I'm sure that you'll agree that you're seeing that sort of sentiment in the market as the media commentators are talking about that. Okay, next thing. Okay, this is proof point of what I was actually talking about. And this, again, comes from the CoreLogic chart pack. This is the dwelling values with a rolling 3-month change. And we can see all the states in the different colors down here. And you can see Sydney is on an upward trend. Melbourne is on a downward trend. Brisbane and Adelaide in that upward trend. And over here, we've got Perth. That is absolutely going mental over in Perth. So that's a lot to take in, folks. I understand that. But it's a bit too early to tell. But for the majority of the markets out there, I believe that we have actually turned. So now the question is, will the market actually start to take off? Okay. Now, that's what we're going to look at in a sec with the market drivers. Now, if you're getting plenty out of this so far, just smash in the window, yes, that all makes sense, or hey, Rob, loving it, or something. Nick says yes, Mandy says yes, Vim says yes, Raymond, yes, Rebecca, Angela. Hoping you guys are getting plenty out of this, folks. Okay, loving it. Thank you. Who's Tob? Thank you, Megan. Who's Tob? Market drivers. Now, market drivers are our ability to start to predict where we think the market is actually starting to go. Unlike indicators, we're not looking at things that have already happened, but we're looking at things that are going to move the market, okay? So how are they used? Well, it's the things that cause the market to move, okay? And that helps us, because of that, to predict what the future. What's wrong with them? Well, this is a little bit of a black art to interpret. There's not really a scientific method that sits behind it. So I've come up with my own method that I'm going to try and teach you in order to do that. So you have to pay close attention to all facets of the market, and you need to be very, very clear that there are markets within markets within markets, and you need to understand your specific region and your specific council all the way down to that level of detail. And there's no single source of data. You need to source this information from a lot of different places. So this is the challenge with the drivers and why a lot of people don't actually use them. One, they don't understand them. And two, they don't know how to source all of the data. So I'm going to help you to try and do that. So what it does, okay, it helps us to predict the future, as I said. So there's 4 segments, and so there's 16 drivers and 4 segments. So there's government incentives. So the government incentives, so major infrastructure projects that are going to roll out all the way around the country, so federal, state, and local government, and then cash incentives and bonuses, both at a federal, state, and local government level, that are going to help you to actually understand what is the government trying to do? The government, when they spend billions and billions of dollars, they create jobs in an area. When they create jobs in the area, that brings people to the area. Those people spend money in the area. As they start to spend money in the area, they spend money on businesses in the area. Businesses in the area then start to then profit. Those businesses start to grow. They can then start to employ more people. Those employed people then start to spend more money in the area. And so it's called trickle-down economics, okay? So that is government incentives, and we're going to touch to them. We've got population growth rate, so birth, deaths, marriages, interstate, intrastate, and international migration. When we understand that, we're going to understand how many people are actually moving into our area in particular, okay? So that's going to give us a huge amount of understanding of demand that might be sitting in the area, okay? Next one, supply and demand. So this is the potential supply and the actual supply as it actually sits in your local geographic area. So development approvals, building approvals, the actual construction health of industry itself, your finance approvals. So if you think about it, development approval is the potential for supply. A building approval is then the actual approval for the commencement to actually occur. And then the finance approval is then the actual commencement of that to actually occur. And then the construction industry health is then giving you some insights into the affordability of all of that. So when you understand all of that combined together, that gives you some insights onto whether or not there's supply to meet the demand that came from the population growth. And then lastly, purchasing power. Can people actually afford to actually purchase this? So unemployment rates. Well, if you don't have a job, you can't borrow. So that's a really key part to this. Interest rates. That is going to depend on your borrowing capacity with the ability to purchase how big a loan can you actually get. Housing, income, and consumption. Do you have any spare surplus cash in the system? If you've got no spare cash, then you're probably not going to spend it on a new house. Instead, you're going to spend it on putting food on the table. And then fiscal policy, there are 2 here. There's the RBA, who talk about interest rates, and there's APRA, who do a lot more fine granular changes. So RBA is what they call macro. So that is, they're changing the entire industry. They're going to change interest rates, and that impacts every industry. It's going to impact the construction industry. It's going to impact the rural industry and the agricultural industry. It's going to impact the mining industry. It's going to impact every industry that actually sits out there. Now, APRA is a little bit more granular. They can actually say, well, for the residential industry, we're going to change the rules under which the banks can lend you money. And so they can turn on and off individual markets at will, whilst RBA does the macro stuff, APRA does the micro stuff, okay? When you understand all of those things together, those 16 different drivers, that's going to give you some insights into where it's actually going to go. Now, we then use those to predict. And then if you want to get super good at actually doing this, we're going to use the market drivers to predict where the market is actually going. We're then going to wait 6 months And then we're going to go back and look at the market indicators. Now, I said before there was a lag on the indicators. What we're going to do is we're going to go back and we're going to confirm whether or not our original assessment is right. So whatever your prediction is, write it down, put it somewhere, put yourself a calendar invite and actually go back and do that. And if you do that over and over and over, or you repeat that process over and over and over, you're going to start to understand, hey, this driver actually caused this. You do that over and over and over, that's going to help you massively in being able to use that crystal ball to get the outcome that you're looking for. Now, as I said before, there is no scientific formula that sits behind this, okay? And so I've come up with it's a relatively rudimentary concept, but that rudimentary concept, once you understand it, will help you massively in actually doing this. So it's a concept called a headwind and a tailwind. So if you imagine if you're walking down the street and you've got the wind at your back, okay, that is a tailwind. That wind is going to push you forward. That is helping you to go in the direction that you want to go. That's a positive thing, okay? If you instead are walking into a gale breeze into your face, that is called a headwind. It makes it very hard to walk down the street. Okay, so that's the headwind and the tailwind. Neutral means that the wind is not blowing at all. And location specific means, well, it might be something that only happens in one area, but not in another. So for example, if we have a lot of people leaving Melbourne and moving to Brisbane, then Melbourne has a headwind because they're losing population, but Brisbane has a tailwind because they're gaining population. So that's what location specific means, okay? So you need to actually understand what's actually happening in those regions. Now, as I touched on before, if you map these out and put them on record, which I have been doing, and I've been putting on public record in these events, I guess for the last couple of years, then you can go back and see whether you're right by looking at those market indicators. So this is my predictions for the last 2 years. And I guess what we're going to cover today is where I think we're going in the next 6 to 12 months. Okay. Now, I've been doing this for many, many years. I've actually been putting them on public record for about 4 years. And when you actually go back, you'll see that I predicted all the way through COVID what was actually going to happen. Since COVID, I've predicted that the boom that we just had and a whole bunch more based on this concept of market drivers, okay? Now, again, caveat, I am not an economist. Please use this information for education purposes only. I'm not telling you what to do here. I'm just giving you some insights in what you can go to do your own research to confirm whether or not you think that what I'm telling you is factual or not. That said, who is interested in actually knowing where do we think we're actually going in the next little while? Give us a shout out. Give me some love. Rodney, Nisha, Nick, Angela, David, Vigian, Joanne. I'm getting a whole bunch of love hearts as well. So thank you, folks. Okay. I'm going to go step by step. Now, there are 16 of these. For the interest of time, I'm not going to look at every single one of them, okay? And so I'm just going to give you some insights into it. But I'm going to encourage you guys to actually go and look at every single one of them. But let's take a look. First one, let's look at government incentives. As I touched on, trickle-down economics. The government spends billions and billions of dollars trying to, I guess, stimulate the economy, okay? They do that in many, many different ways. So we're going to look at what are some of the major infrastructure projects that are actually doing all the way around the grounds, and what are some of the incentives that are actually starting to give us, okay? Now, first one, this is a major infrastructure overview. So this is, I guess, in the vicinity of upwards of $170 billion being spent in New South Wales, $190 billion being spent in Victoria, somewhere in the vicinity of about $80 billion being spent in Queensland, about $160 billion being spent in WA, etc. So we can see where all the money is actually being spent, and we can also see the kind of industries that it's actually being created on, okay? So that's giving us some insights into all these jobs that are actually being created in the area. When we actually break that down, and actually this is how much money is actually being spent in each of the states, you can see that we're fast approaching Q4 of 2024. You can see that we're on an upwards trend with regards to the amount of money that's being spent across the country. Okay, now that upwards trend is going to last for a good couple of years. So then the money will slow down, but it won't actually stop it. So we can see all the way out to 2028. We've still got billions of dollars actually being spent, and we're going to be very similar spend levels to what we are right now, which is still super high, folks. Now, where is the infrastructure being spent? Okay, well, there are more projects than just this, but these are the biggest projects all the way around the country, just to give you some insights into this. So now, WestConnex, $16 billion, Sydney Metro, $12 billion, Melbourne Metro Tunnel, $11 billion, and it goes on and on and on. These are all billion-dollar projects, folks. Now, I want you to notice a trend in what all of these are. These are transport, okay? So this is getting people to and from large areas where they're trying to activate areas. So they want a new area to grow. Well, they need people to move into that area. And the only way that they can get people to move into that area is to create an opportunity for them to still go to their jobs where they're currently located. Okay. So pretty much around the country, most of the state governments have said that they want to create a city that is able to be commuted within 30 minutes. No matter where you live, you can get to anywhere else in 30 minutes, okay? So there are billions and billions and billions of dollars being spent in order to do that. Now, other government incentives. Now, this will change from time to time. There is constantly a first homeowners grant all the way around the country, but there are some states that are boosting those grants as we're coming into this this round of, I guess, growth with regards to the amount of houses that we needed to be created. So Queensland government, for example, have doubled their first homeowners grant to encourage people to actually purchase a newly constructed property. There's going to be a whole bunch of other states that are actually, they're talking about what they do to actually continue to incentivize. It's very similar to the building bonus that we had not that long ago. Now, there are also a whole bunch of other state government incentives that are actually happening, and I didn't put any slides in on these, but New South Wales government is doing a whole bunch of changes to their legislation with regards to complying development codes and creating more opportunities for duplexes to go in more locations. They're doing a thing called transport orientated design, where you can put, if you're within 400, 800 and 1200 meters of a major train station or a train station, then you're going to be able to get more and more density in those areas. So they're doing these with the fast track approval processes. The fast track approval processes in Queensland have been enhanced, as well as also a whole bunch of cash incentives with regards to what they call council contributions. So you can actually apply to actually have those council contributions waived. Their state government is actually funding a whole bunch of those. The Victorian government is talking about getting rid of what do they call neighbourhood character. Neighbourhood character is some of the things that are causing a whole bunch of pain points in the Victorian legislative system, where anyone who thinks that the development that you're doing is not in the character of the area, they can challenge that and take you to what is called VCAT. And so many of the development approvals are taking anywhere up to 2 years to actually get through. So they're trying to cut the red tape on all of those. Both Queensland and WA have also changed what they call granny flat rules. So you can actually start, in the past, you had to have granny actually live in the granny flat. Now you can actually start to rent that out in a whole bunch of places. Similar sorts of incentives are being rolled out in South Australia and WA. Basically, the government is rolling out the red carpet all the way around the place because they know that they need to incentivize it. And there's a whole bunch more that are in the pipeline that are in early draft at the moment. So I guess can't comment on all of those at the moment. But when we start to summarize all of that, then when we start to look at where do we think we're going, I want you guys in the chat window. Do we think this is a headwind pushing against us or a tailwind in our direction? Tailwind. Joanne says tailwind. Rebecca says tailwind. Karen says tail. Vivian says tailwind. Simon, Ken, iPhone. Brad says tailwind. So you can see, folks, tailwind is where it's going, not only for the next 6 months, but also for the next 12 months. We've got a huge amount of opportunity actually coming our way, and that is not going to set to change. You can see that we've got 3, 4, 5 years worth of infrastructure spending all the way around the grounds, plus the incentives for that 1.2 million homes to be created in 5 years. All of those folks are telling us, if I could make that the darkest color green humanly possible, I would. But that's the next one. So let's now look at population growth. Now, there's a whole bunch of population things to start to consider here. There's births, deaths, and marriages. Well, for Australia, we're pretty much not growing a hell of a lot from births, deaths, and marriages. We tend to have 2 kids and 2 kids die off, and we're not growing from births, deaths, and marriages. Okay. Interstate migration, people leaving one state and landing in another, and interstate, intrastate, I should say, people moving from the city to regional out, regional back into the city. A lot of that was happening in COVID as people wanted to get out of the city and become free, but that's kind of stalled at the moment. And then there's the biggest one, which is international migration. Now, when we start to look at this, these are our projections for, I guess, the next 30 plus years with regards to where we're going. You can see that we're going to very well hit, I guess, the 40 million people somewhere just after that 2069, 2070 type period. So we've got a huge growth that's actually coming our way. And when we start to look at that, this is a stat we looked at a little bit earlier. So this is the population growth rate. 518,000 people came in last year. Now, the stats for this year are actually due out in about 15 days' time. And so whilst we don't have the official stats, unofficially, we're anticipated to be somewhere in the vicinity of 450,000 for this year, and probably similar sorts of numbers for the next 2 to 3 years. So major numbers before it then starts to smooth back to, I guess, somewhere in the vicinity of 200 to 250,000. So 518,000 people last year, folks. That is a massive number of people. Now, when we start to look at that, just to put it in perspective, okay, this is where those people have landed. So New South Wales has taken the bulk of those people, Victoria followed by next, Queensland followed by next, and WA. Now, this is super interesting because there are some states like WA, for example, where in the past, the economics of the area has been based on, I guess, the mining and what's actually in and around the mining area. This is one of the first times where genuine demand is moving into the area. And I'm going to give you one reason and one reason alone for why that is. And so both Perth and Adelaide are benefiting from this one thing. And that is for those international migrants who come in that are qualified, so, you know, doctors and lawyers and things like that, where they've actually got a qualification and they want to go into the sector, in order for their previous things to be recognized and I guess come across, they need to go to regional areas. So regional areas, and both Perth and Adelaide qualify as a regional area, yet they are still capital cities and they are still major capital cities. And so when somebody comes in that has to do a qualification and has to work in a regional area, why would they work in the middle of Timbuktu when they can go to beautiful areas such as Adelaide and Perth and keep getting on with business and grow their own business? So we can see 518,000 people, folks, and that trend is set to continue. Now, when we look at the components of this, so natural increase, not a huge amount of natural increase across the board. That's births, deaths, and marriages. Internal migration. So you can see a whole bunch of people have left Sydney. A whole bunch of people have also left Melbourne. Where have they headed to? Well, they've headed to Brisbane and Perth. They are the major winners of the internal migration as people. So that's a location-specific thing. But the bulk of it is coming from overseas migration across the board, okay? So when we start to look at all of those stats together, where do we think that we are going in the next round? Is this a headwind or a tailwind, folks? Tell me what it is. So for intrastate migration. Okay, so that is out to regional. Okay, that's pretty much stopped because of COVID. But interstate, that is going to be location specific. You can see very clearly that if you were in Sydney, for example, that is going to be a headwind. If you're in Brisbane or Perth, that is going to be a tailwind. But for international migration, that is very, very clearly going to be a tailwind. So let's punch those in here. Are you guys getting plenty out of this, folks? Give me some love. It's going well. Thank you. That's giving me some insights. Okay. Now, just to keep you in the groove, I've got some free gifts coming up. So I'm going to give away an annual membership here. This is so that you can attend all of our meetups all the way around the country, both physical and live streamed. So what was the net population increase for international migration over the last year? So Luke says, so amazing. Thank you, mate. That is greatly appreciated. Remember, you got to punch it in and keep punching it in until the lovely Beck unmutes herself with a little timer and says, who is the lucky winner? Beck, you are muted still.
It was Sharon. I don't have a last name for Sharon.
Okay, so you better find Sharon in the list before it goes whizzing too far past. So if Sharon, if that is you, if you can reach out. So the answer, 518,000 people, folks. 518,000. So that is that. Then now we've got supply and demand. Let's have a look at supply and demand. I'm going to start to push forward a little bit faster here. Supply and demand. This is the both potential supply and also the actual supply. Now, I touched on some of these stats a little bit earlier, so I'm going to skim through them a little faster this time around when I was actually talking about how we actually got to this housing crisis in the first place. So the building approvals, this is what the ATO calls, the Australian Bureau of Statistics call this. It's what we call development approvals, okay? So you can see that we had a whole bunch of slumps. We had an actual property slump. We had the COVID market slump where we were told that our markets were going down, our properties were going down 20 and 30%. So nobody was doing development approvals. Then we had a short burst of development approvals when the building and construction boom was on, when the building bonus was sitting there. And then as the cost of construction went too high, we had a second wave slump, and we are only just in recovery right now. Okay, so that is the potential for supply. That is development approvals, or what the ABS call building approvals. Then the actual commencements. So this is construction actually commencing. So again, similar property market slump. Nobody actually started doing that because nobody could actually prove their numbers were going to work. Then COVID happened where we were told 20 to 30% drops. Then the building boom happened. And again, second wave boom and recovery commenced. So we have both a lack of potential supply and also a lack of actual supply sitting in the market, okay? But contrary to all of that, we now have, I guess, every single government giving us all of the incentives to now start to build 1.2 million homes. So do you think that is going to create, I guess, with all the governments actually doing that, we touched on the incentives a little bit higher up in the process. Do you think that we're in a market right now where we could and should be actually punching in? So is this going to be more? Is this a headwind or a tailwind coming in our direction? So give me some love. I'm seeing lots of tailwinds. Not seeing anyone saying a headwind. Lots of tailwinds. So correct answer, tailwinds. Okay, so tailwinds across the board. Okay, now when we start to look at interest rates, now this is where it's going to start to get super technical, folks. And we're all interested in interest rates, and I can almost guarantee every single one of you is going to say, hey, Rob, when do you think interest rates are going to drop? I'm not going to fall for that trick, folks, but I will give you some insights into what the rest of the market is telling you. So the purchasing power. Okay, now in order to understand purchasing power, you need to understand how the economy is actually being driven by the government in order to keep us always moving forward. Okay, so now in order to do that, the government has set a thing called an inflation target. Now, if we have too much inflation, it causes problems. If we have not enough inflation, it causes problems. So we want to be Goldilocks, and we want to be just right. We want to be on this lime green line all the way here. Now, if we have too much inflation, then we have low unemployment, but high inflation. That means interest rates have to go up in order to recover that, which means that everyone's spending habits slow down, which means because they've got no money to actually spend, they're spending it on interest. That slows down the economy. If we go too far the other way, we have low inflation, which means low interest rates, but we also have low unemployment. So, which means people don't actually have jobs. And so we want to be Goldilocks and have it just right. So in order to do that, the RBA has said that going back some time ago in the early 1990s, they said in order to keep that slow and steady pace, we want an inflation target of somewhere between 2 to 3%. So everything that the RBA is doing is trying to get us into that window of 2 to 3%. And if they can do that, our economy will keep growing at a consistent rate. And that is the intention. So when you start to look at this over time, this is where they introduced this way back in 1992, I think it was. You can see how they've actually managed that across the board. We have had, I guess, a few breaches outside of that 2 to 3% range. And more recently, as we had our economy actually struggling, you can see that yellow zone, our economy was actually struggling, and that's why they started dropping interest rates for so long. We got to the lowest interest rates on record. Then we had this funny thing called COVID that then forced us into an artificial recession as they clamped down, they shut down the borders, they stopped people actually spending. The cost of goods went up because it was A, hard to find them, B, nobody was manufacturing stuff. Even if they were manufacturing, they were getting stuck on docks and all sorts of things like that. And so the limited supply meant that the demand went through the roof. So inflation went up as people started paying way more. So when we started to do that, we had, I guess, I'll say record highs, but it's not overall record highs. I was actually in the recession that we had to have all the way back in 1980 when we were paying 17% interest rates. I went through that. But we can see that we did have in the 7% range inflation targets. So the RBA has been managing that by bringing interest rates up. So that when we start to look at interest rates, you can see that interest rates have gone up more recently. And as the interest rates have gone up, that means that we spend less because we're spending it all on paying the loan back. So we have less surplus cash in the system. Now, when we have less surplus cash in the system, especially if we've got an investment property or we've got a house or we've got something along those lines, then we start, especially if we've got an investment property, the first thing that we actually do, we start to lose money on that investment property. So what do? Well, we start to lift the lift the rent rates. And when we start to lift the rent rates, you can see all the way across the country that we've got record interest rates here, rental rates, I should say, record interest rates in Melbourne, in Perth, all the way across the board. We had a massive rental boom that's actually happened. And that's something that is causing a whole bunch of pressure right now because a whole bunch of people want to get out of that market. Okay. So when they're trying to get out of that market, they can't because they can't afford to get out because the interest rates are still too high. So we've got this chicken and egg scenario. So we've got this pressure cooker that's holding everyone in the rental market and everyone's wanting to get out, but they can't quite get out. Now, as inflation starts to drop, I touched on this before, one of the things that starts to happen is unemployment rates start to go up. So there's going to be less people actually having jobs that can actually afford to have loans. So it's a very, very balancing act. Now, how all of that plays out is when we actually start to look at our household and income consumption. The orange line is our consumption when we're actually spending money, and the blue line is, I guess, our disposable income. So you can see here where the interest rates have actually gone up, and so I'd had no disposable income. Now, right this very second, we are sitting right here where we've got very little disposable income. and very little consumption actually happening. We're in this stalemate right now, waiting. Everybody's waiting to see what's actually going to happen with interest rates, because we're at this equilibrium at the moment where they've slowed down the economy, but they haven't slowed it down enough. If they slow it down too fast, then people start to have a lot of surplus cash and they start to spend very, very quick. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to bring us into a gentle landing. Okay. Now that gentle landing, if they don't, they'll overshoot the mark. If they overshoot the mark, then we'll go into the opposite where we actually have, I guess, too much of a boom. Then the prices of everything go up. Then we do this ricochet where we go back and forth, back and forth. So what they're trying to do is get us to have a nice gradual landing safely into that 2 to 3% zone and not overshoot the mark. So that's what they're trying to do. And what they do is they do a thing called a forward projection. Now, a forward projection is the RBA looking at all of those stats and they're making a statement on where they think the market is actually going to be. And so this is an extract out of the last RBA announcement. And so what they've said is the central forecasts are set for inflation to return to the target range of 2 to 3% in late 2025. Okay. So at that point, we've got that perfect match. So that's only about 18, well, not even 18 months away, but that's kind of 12 months away. We're in late 2024 at the moment. So it's not that far, 12 months, and approach the midpoint of 2026. So between 12 and 18 months is where they think that we're in the safe zone. Okay. So this at the moment is slightly slower than they had anticipated. But it's telling you that we've only got about an 18-month window before equilibrium kicks in and everyone is going to have all this, I guess, disposable income ready to actually start purchasing. Okay. So knowing that that's the timeline and that's the window, we can't stop that. We're not in control of that, but we can see what the projection of the RBA is going to be. And at that point, there's going to be a whole bunch of people wanting to leave the rental market and get into the housing market, but only if there's stock. And that's up for you guys to actually start to do, is actually start to create the stock. Now, interest rates. Now, I'm not going to get drawn into where do I think the interest rates are going to drop, but luckily for you, all of the banks tell you what they think. So the Commonwealth Bank thinks that we are currently at our current level of 4.3% cash rate is the peak. Okay. And that they think the first cut is likely to occur in about November, with the rates eventually dropping to about 3.1% by the end of 2025. Okay. Westpac predicts similar, that we've got that our current level is the peak, and they expect again around November, which is not that far away for the first rate cut, and eventually again down to 3.10. The NAB again think that we're at the peak, and they think the first rate cuts will occur in May next year, so a little bit further away. So they're predicting a little bit longer, and they think it'll drop to 3.6, a little bit more conservative. And the ANZ is saying again that we have hit the peak, and that the first cuts will be around February next year. Okay, so depending upon who you are listening to, it's going to be Q4 of 2024. Or it's going to be Q1 of 2025 before the first rate cuts hit. Okay. Now, all of that is clearly based on where do we think, where does the RBA think that the inflation rate is actually going to occur? It is not my role to actually tell you, but what I can tell you is they're trying to bring it into a slow, steady landing. And you can actually see when we look at the inflation that it actually has started to slow. So they're trying to bring it in safely like a parachute. Okay. So we've been skydiving for a little bit. Now we've pulled the chute. Now we're going to try and bring it in for a nice, safe landing. Now, what does that mean? Well, when we look at all of that, because we've got no disposable income, we're not sure where the interest rates are going to drop. We've been holding on to this for a little while. Most of us have had our fixed rate interest that we locked in at those super low interest rates at the bottom of COVID. Most of those have actually now started to expire. And a lot of us are burning cash really hard, which is why we've got no disposable income. And so our consumer confidence at the moment is quite low. So we're not really sure when this is actually going to come back. Okay. Now, when we're sure, we start spending money really well. But because we don't have any spending cash and we're not quite sure, most people aren't putting a level of rigor in that you guys are today in order to actually learn this process. So what does all of this mean? Well, what this is actually telling us is that there's an increased pressure on rising rates has stabilized. Some vendors are struggling to pay their mortgages after a majority of the fixed rates have converted back to variable, and they've got no spare cash in the system. Some vendors know that interest rates have stabilized, but can they ride it out? Have they got enough cash in the system? A lot of them are burning their spare cash to top up, which means that some vendors will be forced to sell. Okay. Now, not all. I think they were talking about a mortgage cliff some time ago. I think we've, I guess, gone past that period of the mortgage cliff, but there are still going to be some opportunistic buying opportunities at the moment. Now, for those people that are doing that, they will potentially be distressed sales. Now, they're not going to be super distressed, and I'm not for a moment telling you to take advantage of people. However, a distressed sale does create an opportunity for creating very creative settlement terms. This is your low and no money down opportunities that are actually sitting here, folks. So when these things are occurring, people are wanting help. And if you can provide the solution to their help, then that creates the opportunity for you. And so I'm going to encourage you to start to think about that when we talk about the low and no money down later on. Again, don't take advantage of people. I'm not that person that's telling you to do that, but rather help someone. If you can help them, then they're going to help you, and we can get a win-win outcome for all of that. Now, all of that said, where do we think that we are actually going to be from a purchasing power side of things? So interest rates, do we think that is going to be a headwind or a tailwind? Tailwind. Unemployment rates, do we think that's going to be a headwind or a tailwind? Unemployment rates, that's actually going to be a headwind because as inflation drops, unemployment goes up. And our fiscal policy, this is APRA starting to open up and change some of the rules with regards to our lending policies. At this point, APRA has been completely silent with regards to any changes at all. And so my take on that is a neutral. So that said, let's have a look across the board. So we can see that when we add all of this up together, it's like a little bit of a scoreboard. It's telling me I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. If I look at them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 tailwinds. I've got one location-specific tailwind. So if I am in Perth, if I am in Brisbane, you've got 8. If I am in Sydney or if I'm in Melbourne, then you don't get that one. That becomes a tailwind. Headwind. So we've got 8 different tailwinds behind us, folks. We've got everything pushing us in the right direction. Where do we think that we are going to go in the next little while? If you think that we are coming up for a boom, punch in the word boom into the chat window. Absolutely. We are absolutely, again, not an economist, not here to tell you what to do, but trying to teach you how to, I guess, go do your own research on this, folks. But hopefully what I'm showing you is the good insights into where I think we're actually going. And somebody said, boom, chicka, boom. Very good. So the key takeaways for you guys. Population growth fueled by international migration is the major driver of demand. We've got a massive limited stock due to a combination of factors. That has been the economic circumstances prior to COVID, the initial COVID panic where we actually locked everything up and caused a technical recession. Then we had a building bonus that actually consumed our surplus stock. Then the building costs have escalated, meaning that all of that has consumed our slack. So we've got 4 or 5 years worth of growth of population, and we've got 3 or 4 years of lack of supply. Now, when those two things combine, then I just saw Nelson with fireworks in there. So thank you, Nelson. That is absolutely. Now, the government incentives are then the rocket fuel that you need. The government incentives are going to get you into this to actually start to take advantage of this. So whether you are ready, folks, or not, okay, is not the point, okay? But if you don't, now is actually the time to take massive action. Whether you're ready for it or not, the market is where the market is. So if you do this, you have the potential for your development profits, and you've also got the potential for the market uplift. This is the one time in my 37 years of doing this that I've seen the opportunity for the double profits that has been so crystal clear, it is not funny. Now, there have been times where it's happened and I've recognized it after. This is the only time that I've been able to recognize it before. And that is because we had artificial events that have broken away from normal economic trends. And now those two are starting to become in alignment. So where do I think that we are going? That's the key. Where do I think we're going? So what are my thoughts on the market? Well, if we look at a normal market cycle, every market cycle has ups and downs, okay? So they have leading and lagging things that happen all the time. So as we start to do this, I'm going to show you what would typically happen for anyone purchasing property over time. So if I was buying a normal investment property, if I bought at a peak and sold it many, many years later, the market does the work for me. The time in the market does it, and it's forgiving for the fact that there is going to be a drop in the cycle that happens anyway. Okay, so I can buy high and sell high later on and just wait it out and ride it out, okay? But in property development, time is your enemy, okay? So for investment, time is the healer. For property development, it is the enemy. So let me show you how it's the enemy. So if I buy low-ish and sell on the other side, I'm going to make a profit. But if I buy at the top and sell at the bottom, I'm going to make a massive, massive loss, okay? And so time is actually my enemy, and I need to use time to my advantage. If I buy at the, I guess, coming into the bottom of the cycle, whoops, I've just lost the, I can, as a market is coming down and I can pick it up on the other side, it can actually work for me. So all of those things can work for me. So I need to understand in property development, I'm buying in one market cycle and selling in another. So knowing where the market is going is super important to me, okay? But we are not in a typical market cycle. As I touched on before, we have had a couple of things that are not a normal cycle. Instead, because we had the artificial recession of COVID, and then we had the artificial boom, I think our market cycle is a little bit more like this, okay? And the bottom was actually flattened out for us and smoothed out because the government spent the money in trying to keep us alive, okay? And so I think that we've got a window between the bottom and it actually hitting the actual true fundamentals of about 12 months between the bottom and where it actually meets the true fundamentals of the market, okay? And then I think that we've got a window of that boom of approximately 2 to 3 years' time, okay? So again, I'm not an economist, folks. This is just my 37 years, both as a, I guess, a buy and hold investor and also as a developer, I guess, doing this. And this is kind of just my read on it. So where do I think? I think we're right here. I think we've already hit the bottom. I think we're starting to come on the upswing of this, okay? But then we're very, very soon going to meet those market fundamentals. Those market fundamentals are when the interest rates are going to, I guess, drop off. And at that point, we are into a huge upwards trajectory of 2 to 3 years. So right now is the time to prepare, folks. Seriously, I cannot stress that anymore. So I want to ask you guys, has this been helpful?
There you have it, folks. That's my wrap on what I think the market is doing right here, right now, and more importantly, what you can do as a small-scale developer to actually take advantage of that. You see, as I touched on in that presentation, 80% of all development applications go through council are a 6-pack and below. That means it is small-scale developers, mums and dads, just like you, that are looking to actually take advantage and do the developments. And so it's the government rolling out the red carpet to try and help you to actually solve this housing crisis. The big guys are getting all the kudos, but it's the little guys that are actually getting the job done. Now, if you are new to property development and you don't quite know whether or not it is something for you, why don't you come to one of our meetups? We run these all the way around the country. We run them in Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, and Adelaide, and you can physically turn up in all of those locations, or you can live stream all the way around the country. So we pretty much run 45 events of those every year. So plenty to actually come into. We are also branching out into the Perth market in the not too distant future. So stay tuned, Perth, if we're coming your way. Now, on top of that, we also have a free course. So the free course is a cut down version of our 12-month education and mentoring program that will give you an overview of the framework that you need to start to apply if you're thinking of becoming a full-time property developer. So very, very worthwhile to actually check that out and see whether or not you think property development is for you. And on top of that, excuse my cough, I was talking all weekend last weekend, so I still got a little bit of a rasp. On top of that, we do run our property development formula program. That is our formal 12-month education and mentoring program. If you have any interest at all in learning to become a property developer, why don't you reach out, have a chat to us as to how we might be able to help you on your journey. Till then, folks, I'm hoping to see you at one of our upcoming meetups, and I'm going to say bye for now. Bye.